everything you think you know about kinetic energy, momentum, and arrow penetration is wrong. For the last 2.5+ hours, I've been researching kinetic energy and momentum and how it applies to the penetration of arrows for an article that I had planned to write. And I found out that I don't know anything about the subject, and my understanding was always momentum mattered more, and I'm wrong. But don't get too excited if you're a kinetic energy guy, because you're also wrong. And I've had this discussion hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times with a bunch of different people, and I've never met a single person who was actually right about this. So, with that said, a couple caveats. One, this is going to be really long-winded, because I'm going to try to relay to you the information that I've found, but I'm not a physicist. Like, I'm not an expert. I'm just relaying the information that I found from experts, and hopefully explaining it in a way that makes sense as compared to all the big words they were using. And number two, I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off with this video. But that's okay, because I want you to get in the comments below and tell me why I made you mad, because I want to discuss with you further this subject. Okay, so during this video I'm going to have my laptop on my lap a lot. You might see me looking down. I'm referencing the articles and things like that that I found to explain things to you. I'm also Googling things to give you more proper definitions, etc. So, like I said, you're wrong. So am I, though. It's okay, we're all wrong. We'll start with just the really basics. So kinetic energy is movement that has no direction. It's non-directional movement. Momentum is directional movement. That's the difference right there. So an object with higher kinetic energy will do more damage than an object with lower kinetic energy. An example that I read is, would you rather get hit in the face with a 10-pound object at 1 mile an hour or a 1-pound object at 1,000 miles an hour? Well, it's the 10-pound object. If you pick the other one, you're an idiot. And that smaller object has a ton higher kinetic energy. Like, that is truly dangerous. The other object's just going to kind of hurt. So, we also see that with bullets, where a higher kinetic energy bullet does more damage to an animal. But the problem is with a bullet is we're dumping energy into an object. We're not necessarily, and I know you do want penetration with a bullet also, but with an arrow we're trying to penetrate all the way through. So they don't exactly match up, right? So yeah, momentum. That's where momentum comes in. And that linear energy, and like that's what matters, because it's that object and its movement forward through another object, target deer. Deer in this, we'll use a deer for this example. Except that's not exactly right either. Because it is that, but there's outside forces that act on it. So there's something called the conservation of momentum, and the definition is a principle in physics. It's the total linear momentum of a system of particles not acted upon by external forces and is constant in magnitude and direction irrespective of any reactions among the parts of the system. Basically, that's the objects in motion will stay in motion. I think that's kind of the same thing. But when you hit a deer, there's your outside force that's acting upon that arrow, and it's hurting momentum. And so, like, momentum doesn't exactly answer the penetration. Like, it's not really a good way to measure penetration for our purposes, because there's a whole other side to that, like the outside forces thing that doesn't get attention drawn to it when we talk about momentum. So this is where it starts to get interesting. I've been reading forums and I've been reading articles, blah blah blah, and I found this on a forum, and I'm going to read it to you and kind of paraphrase to help keep it a little shorter. It says this is an easy question to answer. I call bullshit on that. One finds that if a fractional force dominates, as one has when shooting a target where the resistance is caused by the target material squeezing the arrow shaft, that kinetic energy is correct. Okay, so kinetic energy is the answer again. If the resistance to penetration is proportional to the velocity, then penetration distance is proportional to momentum. So basically what they're saying is, if the resistance of this is equal to what the resistance of this is, or proportional, so basically how fast this is going, kinetic energy, because kinetic energy is half of mass times speed squared, or times velocity squared. So the kinetic energy is going to be faster generally because the velocity is squared in that equation. So if this faster object means more resistance here because the resistance is proportional to the speed of this, then momentum is going to be the answer, because momentum is generally slower because it's just mass times velocity with no squaring. That's where it gets fun. And if the resistance is proportional to the velocity squared, then the arrow never stops and penetration is infinite. I don't really grasp that. I'm assuming what that means is the velocity squared, if that's... I don't really grasp that part, but essentially what it's saying is, if that is true, which it's not for us, then penetration's never ending. Well, again, that really doesn't help us because it's not true in our case. So then this person follows up by saying, this meets the common sense test as when the resistance increases with velocity. That's the first proportional thing we were talking about. So the faster this goes, the more resistance is here. The higher velocity arrows penetrate less. So what they're saying is because this has a higher resistance and this is moving faster, this resistance will slow this down much faster. Whereas if this was moving slower, in a momentum case, the resistance here is going to be slower and it's going to slow the arrow down slower. Simple enough. So momentum's the answer, right? The real world is not pure, and the resistance to arrow penetration will be a mixture of forces. Ha ha! This is where it gets fun. So those previous things I said all have to do with assuming that the resistance is going to be equal always across the entire deer. It's not, because we know there's blood, there's muscle, and there's bone. And blood is a liquid, so that's always going to have the same resistance. But muscle is elastic, and it has a plastic property. But bone is also elastic and has a plastic property. But the elastic property of muscle is higher than the plastic property, and the plastic property of bone is higher than the elastic property. Isn't this fun? Okay, so later this person says, personally I like momentum for deer and kinetic energy for targets, or maybe 75% momentum and 25% kinetic energy. Okay, so this person believes the momentum is the answer, but doesn't discount that kinetic energy also matters. So yeah, I mean, that right there says that most everybody is wrong, because most everybody is either on the momentum or kinetic energy side. Not a lot of people recognize that it's kind of a happy mixture. Now, of course, you can debate what the mixture should be, but yeah, we're not even going to get into that. That's not the point here. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down on here, and this person basically talks about how the assumption is an increase in velocity means increase in resistance, which is true for projectiles moving through fluid because of something called the drag equation, but not for projectiles moving through solid or semi-solid objects, animals, blah, blah, blah. So the drag formula can't be applied because there's no fluid, or an animal is not a fluid. But you know, yeah, no, that's not how that works. We're talking biology and mixing physics. I was gonna say, aren't creatures made up of mostly water, but that doesn't apply here, so ignore that. Okay, so anyways, we're back to this. They say penetration, in this case elastic materials, a combination of higher velocity and lower mass is more efficient than higher mass and lower velocity. Penetration requires work, and work is performed by kinetic energy. Okay, so kinetic energy is the answer. That'd be too easy. So he later on explains a common sense test would be blow up a balloon partially and then try to slowly stab it with a pen, as compared to quickly just poking it and see which pops easier. This is the best answer I've seen so far. It says this is actually a very complex problem and one that is absolutely not solved. So there's your answer, by the way. I hope you continue to watch this because I'm going to give my perspective here in just a little bit. But the answer is there is no answer. That's why we're all wrong. There's no right answer per se. Like, it's not just momentum. It's not just kinetic energy. With a simple and erroneous conclusion that with any given amount of kinetic energy in a projectile, the projectile with the highest momentum factor will penetrate best. That solution doesn't work, and a logical test would be to use a pen, and that's when he talks about the balloon thing. And this is the, like I said before, that's the best answer. This is like really what kind of made the light bulb flip for me. And after this, I'm going to stop reading, and then I'll explain my take. Poncelet, I think that's how you say it, developed an equation to explain this, and then this person goes into the equation, and they reference something called EK, and I'm not really sure what that is, to tell you the truth, but they say EK momentum represents the extremes of the answer, and therefore opinions fluctuate between the two. Oh, he must mean kinetic energy. Okay, so now I just caught on. It's kinetic energy he's talking about. In reality, the target defines the relative importance, and of course, targets are generally not homogeneous. Or homogeneous. Homogeneous. Basically, targets aren't the same. Alright, I'm going to set this to the side now. So, like I said, you're wrong, I'm wrong, everybody is wrong. Why? Because there's no right answer. There is no right answer to this question. It is not momentum versus kinetic energy. Because it's not always kinetic energy, and it's not always momentum. Most of the time I think it's just a happy mixture of the two. Furthermore, not every situation is going to be the same. No matter what, we're talking, are you going to hit the shoulder and then the muscles behind it? Are you going to hit just the muscles? Or is there going to be a rib bone in there? Are you not going to hit anything? Is it going to be predominantly guts? Every single situation is different. Now, I don't like this because I like black and white and I like facts. So I'm going to further research this subject. This is a 380 grain arrow, and it doesn't even matter, man. This is just a tough one. There is no right answer. It's not momentum, so I was absolutely wrong. But it's not kinetic energy either, so you were wrong. One thing I can infer from what I read, though, if you're looking to dump energy into an object, I think kinetic energy is the way to go. So if you're shooting blunts at small game, you need to shoot the lightest, fastest arrow you possibly can. That seems to be a pretty agreed upon subject. Higher kinetic energy bullets do more damage, so higher kinetic energy arrows should, in theory, do more damage to small game when you're shooting blunts. So yeah, for small game, fast arrows, bam, ha! I recommended something. But as far as big game goes, I think the answer is lies in speed of the arrow, as that goes into both momentum and velocity, or momentum and kinetic energy, but the mass of the arrow also matters, and then you have to include things like how efficient your bow is, and things of that nature. One person says on there, a heavier arrow transfers more energy from the bow to the arrow, so in theory that should have more energy to begin with. There's a lot there too, so that has to come into equation. And then again, the medium you're shooting. I mean, if you're shooting an animal, where are you going to hit the animal? You always want to hit them in the right place all the time, but that's not always going to happen. So, guys, I think the best answer is really just shoot what you are comfortable with. Shoot what has worked for you in the past and what you have confidence with. Don't be afraid to play around and try new things. But at the end of the day, it's what you believe in. Hey, thanks for watching my video on the physics of archery. If you liked it, don't forget to like it or dislike it. I really don't care. You can comment below if you think I'm an idiot. I'd love to talk it out with you. And share it with your friends if you think they're idiots or they think you're idiots, or vice versa. Just share it around. Really appreciate it. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ding that notification bell so you're notified when I upload new stuff. And we will catch you on the next one.